Hello and welcome to another Mental Wealth Moves podcast by your host, Casey Dubravcic, owner and operator of Revitalize Ketamine Clinics, ROHCT Wellness Bar, and co-founder of Epik Biosciences. Hello and welcome to another Mental Wealth Moves podcast. I'm your host, Casey Dubravcic, and I am happy today to present to you 5 wellness hacks that you can do today to become slightly better than you were yesterday. So I'm your host of the Mental Wealth Moves podcast, where the best investment you can ever make is yourself. I am in psychiatry. I've been in healthcare since 2004. I got somewhat jaded on the traditional treatments in that in large part we're very illness oriented, and we're also very slow to be able to treat. And so we kind of wait until the illness is onset and it's late stage at that point. The symptoms have been present for some time. So I'm very much interested in wellness-oriented treatment. So help people become the best versions of themselves so the illness never is onset. And I think that's the move, and that's where most of healthcare should be trending. And there was an interesting piece of data that came out today, which has been, kind of the status quo for some time, in that the United States outspends pretty much every other nation pretty excessively on healthcare costs and has some of the worst healthcare outcomes. And I think that's in large part due to the potentiated illness model that we're currently seeing in healthcare, where honestly, the pharmaceutical industries, the insurance industries, and most providers and agencies are somewhat incentivized to keep people ill, keep them on daily medications, and keep them coming back forever. It's unfortunate, and I think the best change that you can make to a system is from within it. And so that's part of why I'm creating all of this, is to bring understanding and to bring better clarity to something that I think a lot of us are seeing. And being a healthcare practitioner, and again in healthcare since 2004, I think I'm in a unique position to be able to bring to light some of these issues. And so today we're talking about 5 wellness hacks that you can do to really become the best version of yourself. And so the 5 wellness hacks are sunlight, community, activity, hydration, and nutrition. And so we're going to go into all those real in depth. My name is Casey Dubravcic. I am a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. I am board certified. I can prescribe and diagnose, and I am the owner and founder of Revitalize Ketamine Clinics. We have 3 locations in Flagstaff, Arizona, Sedona, Arizona, and Prescott Valley, Arizona. I am also the owner and founder of ROHCT Wellness Bar, Revitalize, Optimize, and Harmonize Clinic and Therapeutics. It's a wellness bar. It's a place for you to become the very best version of yourself. We cultivate the space and the tools that you can use so you can really become the ultimate version of yourself. And we're trying to be slightly better than we were yesterday. We're all works in progress. It's important to recognize that. And we're all doing the best we can with what we have. Most people, the term wellness by itself is kind of a nefarious principle. It's like, what does that even mean? And so I really like to help understand that topic. So wellness is very much individualized, in my opinion. For some people, the pinnacle of wellness today is not supersizing your meal at McDonald's. That's great. Good job. You got to start somewhere. All right. And for some people, it's this whole biohacking stack in addition to cold plunging and saunaing and community connection and ecstatic dance and supplements and injectables to really become the best version of themselves, supercharged. And so I like to say everything in moderation, including moderation. There's lots of ways to really become the best version of yourself, and you have to start somewhere. Anything that you do, you should start off committed to, and you should make slow steps. So remember, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and the journey to wellness is just that. It's a journey, it's not a destination. And so there'll be plateaus along the way. I like to think the 5-year Casey stock market graph, where you are really You zoom in, and it's not always so pretty. You zoom out, and you see that nice, even ups graph for most people. And then sometimes the days, the weeks, the months can be less than stellar. And so recognizing that and moving forward from that, super important. And so today, I should also mention too that something I'm really excited about. I'm the co-founder of Epik Biosciences, and that's a really interesting pharmaceutical startup that has the capacity to change many lives. It has the capacity to take on the opioid epidemic, as well as the monoamine modulation current postulation when it comes to kind of the epitome of mental health care. And so you think of mood super basically, right, as a waveform. Depression, anhedonia, the I don't care is on the bottom, and then anxiety, hypervigilance up top. People with trauma, they bounce back and forth a lot quicker between those two. Pretty much every other medication ever prescribed, SSRIs, SNRIs, mood stabilizers, antipsychotics, benzodiazepines, about 10 to 30% effective long term, and just kind of squishing that wave zone. So you may be less depressed, maybe less anxious, maybe less mood stability, maybe less suicidality. In general, kind of less everything. And I don't want to demonize anything. I think daily medications have a great spot in medicine, particularly for people that have something about their situation that they're unable to change. That being said, it can also be helpful to get out of bed so you can put one foot in front of the other, so you can start moving forward in your life, so you can see a therapist, so you can go to the gym. Those types of things have really the lasting benefits. That being said, a lot of people need a catalyst for change to really kind of supercharge their results. I like to tell people at Revitalize Ketamine Clinic, no one needs ketamine. No one needs an ego dissolution agent. A million other ways to get to a healthier headspace. In general, those ways can take decades to get there, if ever. So it's important to recognize that. And it's important to also recognize that our society, in large part, is not very conducive to mental wellness. That being said, it's very accessible, more accessible now than ever. We live in a glory age. We live in like the golden age of availability of resources. Most everyone in the United States has running water. Most everyone has enough food, and most everyone has access to ubiquitous knowledge available right at the tips of their fingertips, to be able to tap into really amazing sources of information and knowledge and people, and everything is what you make it, right? You can watch cat videos, which are amazing, and so are dog videos and epic fails, and you can watch an incredible dissertation on particle physics, and it's all available just by click a couple of little finger taps. So super interesting time to be alive. I love being in medicine right now. I feel like it's a wonderful time to be in medicine because we're actually proving past wisdom with science. Real quick kind of example of that. So an aura, right? Like a very woo-woo term, right? A-U-R-A, your aura. And we really know that that coincides incredibly well with the microbiome, which is this energetic field of your microbiome, which is like these mini little dead skin cells and flora that are just floating off of us, and they're tied to us, and people understand their pheromones, and all this ties into your microbiome. And so within 6 feet of each other, our microbiomes are intermingling. And that could be considered an aura back in the day, moments ago. And so it's a really interesting time, like I said, to be in medicine. So let's dive right in. And so first one, sunlight, outside time. We have this beautiful, wonderful, life-providing force that is the sun and sunlight. And we know that, we're in this perfect spot in interposition, planetary position, where we can have liquid water and we can have enough sunlight and to be warm enough and to be cold enough. And so we're in a perfect space, and, it's divine intervention, whatever you want to call it. It's something that, allowed us to be here. Super cool stuff. And so that sunlight is an incredibly wonderful tool for you to really become the best version of yourself. And so spending time outside, I know when I used to work in the intensive care unit, or particularly in my educational component of school, when they'd put us in a box and with fluorescent lighting, it was like the worst thing ever. I'm like, give me a window, give me a solar tube, give me something. And there's a lot of science to back that up now. We know that having just a little bit of sunlight in your life can be incredibly valuable to be able to be synthesizing vitamin D for most people. Most people still aren't getting enough vitamin D, and supplementation can be an incredibly powerful thing for mental health and for physical wellness. We give vitamin D3 injectables at both ROHCT Wellness Bar and Revitalize Ketamine Clinic, and that can really supercharge your ability to fight any sort of infection. Also really helpful for any sort of depression and anxiety. Interesting thing. And so, that's something that occurs naturally when you spend time in the sun. We also know that low angle sun, the sun sets and sun rises, there's a reason they're so pretty. They actually help reset your circadian rhythm, and so actually get you back on track in regards to being able to go to sleep at a normal time and wake up at a normal time. So we know that evolutionarily all this stuff happened too quickly, fluorescent lighting, all that fun stuff. And so evolutionarily we should be going to sleep with the sun, waking up with the sun, living off the land with 13 families where everyone's a cog in the wheel, and that your role is super well appreciated and needed for your tribe to thrive. That being said, so the types of trauma, and I went through these before, but I'll go through them again. So we know trauma is super subjective. There's the big capital bold T's of trauma, the big gnarly traumas, and the little italic T's of trauma, those little invalidations, and they all add up. And we also know that in general that the that 541 is bothering me for some reason. I'm gonna go stop that. Okay, that's better. And so we know in psychiatry, anything that we prescribe for sleep will stop working or reduce working over time. So trazodone or Ambien or doxepin, pretty much anyone that I would ever prescribe those to, eventually we'd have to go up on dosing. So pretty interesting. We also know that the quick fix, you spend 5 days out in the woods with no artificial lighting, 95% of sleep-wake disorders will go away. So again, we know in large part it's a societal construct. The dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, Marshall Linehan's teaching protocol, the emotional regulation skills tools, right? How to handle difficult people, how to handle difficult situations, and how to handle difficult emotions. Pretty much in large part, we learn those exclusively from our parents from ages 0 to 11. Then peers 12 to 19, and then romantic relationships 19 and up. So that being said, if our parents weren't taught how to handle difficult people, difficult situations, or difficult emotions, they can't be expected to teach those to us. So it's important to recognize, and it's a muscle, right? So Tony Robbins talks about that, where do I still get upset? Absolutely. Do I still get sad and soul crushed? Absolutely. Do I let it crush me for days or weeks anymore? No. I'll be in that for 20 minutes and then I'll work my way out of it. I know there's movement ways to get out of it. I know there's all sorts of other things that can be incredibly helpful. Outside time, sunlight, again. So we know that the vitamin D synthesis is a big deal of sunlight. We know the circadian rhythm is a big deal of sunlight. Again, there's a reason those sunsets and sunrises are so pretty. Really should be drawn to those. And we know those 4 types of trauma: the historical trauma, the intergenerational trauma or epigenetic trauma, and then the societal trauma, as well as the environmental trauma. And so you could say, it's micro traumas too. I use trauma loosely. Trauma can be an invalidation. Trauma can be cell phone radiation. Basically, it's something that your body has to contend with. And what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. There's a lot of truth to that. And so this didn't happen to me, this happened for me. And it's making those shifts that can be incredibly powerful. That's what we see with ketamine every day. I like to say, you zoom out far enough, you can find the gift. When you're living in it, when you're living in this hamster wheel, it's almost impossible to find the gift of those types of things. And it's doable. So it's important to recognize that as well. And so I think, and my belief, and a growing number of psychiatric providers' belief, is that every trauma is healable given the right setting, and circumstances. And so we really try to pride ourselves on creating a real conducive space, as well as really that set and setting that can be incredibly helpful for having that reset. And so That third type of trauma, that's societal, in large part, that's what keeps us from getting good sleep. And the environmental too. So quick fixes, blue light filtering glasses, like right when dusk hits. And normally that's enough, because like most people, realistically, it'll be hard to go out into the woods for 5 days with no artificial lighting, because most people need their digital leash right there. You just wrecked most of the benefits from it. And just looking at it briefly, or turn on a headlamp with LEDs, or turn on the headlights of the car that you probably drove out there, turn on any sort of lantern that isn't fire. And so really hard to avoid artificial lighting, or that, Good Samaritan is coming to check on you, making sure you're okay, and then you're back to square one. So we should make, I think that's something that a couple people, like Aaron Rodgers and a couple other people, have done those darkness retreats. So those are super cool. So you just like make this place super dark, and you have to feel your way around, and it's really a great way to reset your autonomic nervous system. It can be incredibly frustrating too for a lot of people. I've heard some anecdotal stories. It's kind of funny, and again, sunlight, incredibly valuable. We know the ozone, the lack thereof, greenhouse gases cause an excessive amount of sunlight exposure to cause lots of issues. Speaking of traumas, right? One blister burn increases your risk of skin cancer by significant amounts. I don't want to say the percentage, because I'll probably be wrong in my guess. I think it's something like 60%, but I did it anyways, so you can call me out if that was incorrect. So that's the first kind of pillar wellness hack. Second one, I would say, is community connection. And so we're all social creatures at the core of us, and it's really important to be able to cultivate that. And so I've heard people like, oh, I'm an introverted extrovert. Like I go out and I have an amazing time, and then like I don't want to go out for 3 months again. And I would argue that those people are performing in large part. So they don't feel safe to be their authentic self in front of these people, or they feel like they really have to perform to get people to like them. In which case, yeah, that's going to be exhausting. Like you're putting on this intense show for people, a lot of people. And so that will be incredibly important to recognize and to work forward with. And so that's exciting. That's what ROHCT is about, really creating that community. We got workshops, we got all sorts of cool stuff happening here. Dance community, wellness community, biohacking, all sorts of fun stuff. So really allowing a safe place to do that and to talk about things can be incredibly valuable, and to really cultivate community around so many things, right? Your community could be around needle stitch. Your community could be around yoga or meditation, or your community could be around motocross riding. Your community could be around skateboarding or snowboarding. Your community could be around flow arts. Your community could be around a dance and movement. Like your community could be around drinking beer and watching football. Like your community could be around, going out to bars and drinking wine. Like there's lots of ways to cultivate community, and it is important to cultivate community. And so, I would say some are probably relatively healthier long-term than others. And so really trying to determine what you want to define you and make steps towards that. We are a combination of the 5 people we spend the most time with, so take that into consideration as you're cultivating community. So if you're around people that are bringing you up, that's super important and incredibly helpful. If you're around people that are bringing you down, maybe not the best move. And so 50 Cent's book, Curtis Jackson, and Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, both really great reads in my opinion, and they both talk about withdrawals and deposits when it comes to relationships. And so you should be in relationships that it's at least even for deposits and withdrawals. If you're in relationships, that are mostly withdrawals, like you want to mitigate that. Like that's toxicity, and that's causing less positive and health for you in general. And so it's important to, we say in therapy, name it to tame it. So when you recognize that, that's incredibly valuable. So just name it to tame it, look at it, and then determine, hey, is this something that I want to do? Are these people I want to surround myself with? And giving yourself for movement and for grace. One of the Buddhist sayings that I like is like looking at an old photo. One of the biggest forms of human suffering is looking at an old photo of yourself and thinking that's the same person. Like, you're a different person, or you have the capacity to be a different person that walks away from listening to this podcast than walked into listening to this podcast. And so you always have that capacity to literally change your mind and how you fit into this universe. And it's super cool, and that's super interesting. And so giving yourself space for evolution is a super powerful wellness hack in and of itself. So lots of ways to cultivate community, and it is super important to cultivate community. So again, 5 people you spend the most time with, you're going to be a combination of them. And so try to surround yourself with people who want to be slightly better than they are. They don't have to be like farther than you along. They just should be motivated and driven to be improving. And so that's an important kind of recognition that this, you bugger, is this still going? Yeah, it's still going. Neat. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so the next thing is so the activity, movement. And so activity and movement, so powerful. And movement is quite literally medicine. And so like I'll feel so much better after going to a dance. Like my back will hurt, my knees will hurt, and then I go to a dance and I start moving with the music, and then the next day, like I wake up, there's no back pain, there's no knee pain. And so I know that like that quite literally is providing endorphins, feel good, like I like doing this is a fun thing. And then also providing more viscosity and more like inflammation, quite literally, but inflammation in a positive way where there's more blood flow. And so the capillary beds are more saturated, there's more movement, there's more juice in the area, and those may be lymphocytes, those may be all sorts of things. There's cool wellness hacks in that the stem cell injections intra-articular into joints can be incredibly powerful for helping like regrow meniscuses. Menisci, I don't know, I'll have to ask Yuri or Darius, those guys are smart. And then I would say, so movement can come in lots of different forms, right? Movement can be rock climbing, movement can be dancing, movement can be singing, movement, through your movement can be playing football, movement can be playing ultimate frisbee, movement can be just hiking and walking. Walking is some of the best medicine that you'll ever do. And so just making a conscious decision to walk further than you are driving. Park a little bit farther away, it doesn't take much energy, and then you're walking more, and that's okay. And so we know that when it comes to mood disorders, that pushes and pulls, like the strength-based training, are actually better for you than the cardiovascular as far as reducing the amount of anxiety or depression. And so really highly recommend that, like 3 to 5 times a week, weightlifting. And it doesn't have to be weights, you don't have to go to the gym, but if you're doing pull-ups and push-ups and squats, like you're going to get those same benefits. You just have to go to burnout, 3 to 5 sets, and that's where you're going to get the real benefits from it when you go to failure. And so take that into consideration. And then cardiovascular activity, helpful, and way better than nothing, and not quite as good for mood. It seems to be the consensus. And so still good for you, and still good for your brain, and still good for your body, and everything in moderation, including moderation, right? Like you can self-medicate with vodka, you can self-medicate with marijuana, you can self-medicate with pornography, you can self-medicate with news consumption, you can self-medicate with food, you can self-medicate with yoga, you can self-medicate with running, you can self-medicate with strength training. Some of those are going to be healthier than others, and we've all got coping strategy toolboxes that are going to be helpful for us. Again, everything in moderation, including moderation. And so when it comes to movement, and when it comes to self-medicating, I should finish that segue. You should really consider, hey, am I doing this for health reasons, or am I doing this to get away from something? Or it's probably a combination, and normally is. And we're all in the bell curve of everything. So like most of us do like this much of self-medicating when we're doing an activity. Like I'm bored and the pantry's right there and there's something delicious, and that might be more on the higher end of the bell curve as far as the distribution of how much of this is self-medicating for boredom or sadness or whatever, and then grabbing a few nuts here or there, that might be more on this side of things, so less self-medicating. Most of us are doing this amount of self-medicating, and I feel that bell curve distribution is also appropriate with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or major depressive disorder, or generalized anxiety disorder, or panic disorder, even schizophrenia. Like most of us, at least a few times in our life, have heard, "Oh, did you call my name?" And nope. And so obviously there's a lot more than just that with paranoid schizophrenia, and we all exist on the bell curves of all of those, in my opinion. And so I'm a psychiatric provider, and likely I'm not your psychiatric provider, so always take that into consideration when you're listening to anything that a professional is saying. Is I don't know you and your particular situation, and so take everything I'm saying with a big grain of salt when it comes to your particular situation. I am painting in broad swaths, and so I'm trying to be pretty inclusive in regards to how I give the advice. And you're still an individual, and you should be treated as such. So if you have specific situations about your situation, or specific questions about your situation, talk to your healthcare provider about that for safety, for so many different reasons. You shouldn't go out and run a marathon if you have a ventricular septal defect that hasn't been diagnosed, or you got a dissecting aortic aneurysm. That's a real big deal. So don't do that, and talk to your doctor or your provider about what is going on for you. All right. And so, again, I talked about movement, I talked about dancing, I talked about walking, I talked about hiking, I talked about physical activity. So let's move on to hydration. So really, you should be drinking your water, people. Drink your water. You should fill up on water, and then everything else comes secondary to that. And so you should be having like 3 or 4 of these guys a day. These are the bigger ones. That's good stuff. All right. So hopefully you took a pause and you chugged some water. If you haven't, I'm going to take another chug and give you the opportunity to chug some water. And if you don't have water around you, take this opportunity to go get some water, because it's good for you. Anecdotally, I just heard a story about a gentleman who was having real chronic gastrointestinal issues that looked like Crohn's disease, these are the point of getting like exploratory laparotomies, all sorts of things. So we know so much of our gut brain is our brain, and so it affects all sorts of things. Really interesting stuff like microbiome transplants, where you can get through fecal transplants and other ways, you actually can get a much healthier microbiome in your gut, healthier balance, and it can be curative for depression, it can be curative for anxiety, definitely curative for Clostridium difficile, it can be curative for Crohn's disease, it can be curative for inflammatory bowel syndrome, or IBS, is that so where your bowels are sad most of the time. And so we know in large part that there's a misalignment or an imbalance when it comes to the flora. So for most people, I'm going to recommend probiotics, like 60 to 90 billion CFU, the refrigerated kind. If you're getting them not refrigerated, chances are most of them are biodeactivated with shipping things these days. Some things will go up to like 120, 150, 180 degrees in shipping, because they're like in these big box trucks, and so it kills pretty much everything. Unless you're getting the refrigerated ones, then there's live cultures in there. Kefir, yogurt, kombucha, all those things can be just as good, if not better. So consider. And then, what was I going to say? Something that seemed important. Let's just go back to hydration. So you should drink enough water to feel full from the water most of the time. The alkali. So this gentleman who had all of that bowel syndrome stuff, he went to a place where they had high alkaline water, where you could actually adjust it from, like natural pH balance, like 7.5, whatever, 7.2, something like that. And you could turn up the alkali like as high as like 11 or something like that. And he would drink like 9 or 10 most of the time. I don't really recommend going above 10 for most people. And then he had an incredible shift in his health and wellness. And so pretty awesome stuff that can be tied to the alkalinity of your water. And tastes better too, I think. And so I have RO water here at ROHCT. You can see the water cooler with Zoolander Merman, and he is swimming around in reverse osmosis water with realkalinized, and so a realkali filter, incredibly valuable for because all those nutrients and minerals get kind of sapped from the water with RO water. That's really healthy for you. You get most of the stuff taken out of the bad junk. And because there's like, oh my gosh, like antibiotics in the water, there's like opioids in the water, there's all sorts of stuff in the water. And so think about that. Or don't think about that, because that's not fun to think about. And then know that you should drink enough water. That's super important. And then also, the last thing on these 5 pillars is nutrition, and so dietary intake. And again, I like to say everything in moderation, including moderation. We also know the SAD diet, the standard American diet, is pretty ubiquitous. And so we're looking at really a lot of refined carbohydrates with high sugar. And we know those two things are very pro-inflammatory. And so this food stabilizers, like I saw a meme the other day with all these things that was showing like kids cereals. And so there was like tricks or whatever, in Australia versus the United States. And the amount of ingredients that we have in the United States is just bonkers, like all these dyes and stabilizers that they don't have in other countries. And, we're looking at rates of juvenile diabetes, kid diabetes, and kid obesity that are just off the charts. It's super sad. And we know that in large part it's related to our diet, and we also know in large part it's related to those stabilizers, as the refined carbohydrates that are ubiquitous in our culture and our society. I think we're the fattest we've ever been, something like that, as a species. And so we know that there's no such thing as big boned. We've seen that X-ray of the very obese individual, and you see the bones that are inside of them. And it's uncomfortable to live like that, and our society is conducive to getting people to that point. Our leisure activities revolve around watching TV and eating food in large part. And so being aware of that, again, name it to tame it, and knowing that everything in moderation, including moderation. So coming off of things slowly and moving slowly towards where you want to be is really the move always. Anything again in here that you decide, like, I want to do that, it'll crash on a diet, you'll crash off a diet. So really trying to be moderation, like take into account moderation in all fronts. And so, basically the big guidance is to shop the periphery of the grocery store. So the fresh fruits and vegetables, the lean proteins, the non-refined carbohydrates, staying away from all that boxed, packaged stuff in the middle of the supermarket. Like when refined sugar, cane sugar came out in the, I think, 1600s to 1700s, like people were like going hysterical in the streets. It was so like new to us. And so really, really interesting history revolving around sugar and refined carbohydrates in general. We've really found how to make foods very unhealthy. So the SAD diet, again, the standard American diet, we know it increases inflammation, increases depression, increases anxiety, and decreases focus and attention. So it definitely potentiates a lot of the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder out there in kids. It makes it harder for them to focus when it's already hard to focus in our society. And so, again, listen to my other podcast about ADHD as a superpower. I think it's really important to recognize that ADHD is an incredible superpower when harnessed properly. The problem is we're not a strengths-based society, we're not a strengths-based educational system. And so looking at how we can shift to that, I think in large part doing some aptitude testing early on in schools and having really specialized schools that are more related to people's strengths. Your strengths will always be your strengths, and your weaknesses will always be your weaknesses. So in general, and this works for everyone, not just ADHD, you should farm out your weaknesses and hone your strengths. And then we'd be a lot better off as a society, if you ask me. All right, and then, so again, everything in moderation, including moderation, I think is really important from a American perspective to take that understanding. And so you will socially ostracize yourself probably if you bring boiled chicken to events and stuff. That being said, you can do that, and that's okay. I don't care. If you want to do that, that's totally cool. I'm a fan of you. Good job. What's good for you is good for the universe. Also, I think having a cheat day on a Saturday or Sunday, and this is something I think Tim Ferriss and the Huberman, a lot of those guys talk about, in that having a cheat day can be incredibly valuable and helpful for your mental health. And it allows you to go socialize without having much kind of repercussions of that. You'll ostracize yourself if you're very, very picky at a menu in a restaurant, and you can definitely eat very, very healthy 7 days a week or 6 days a week. Well, 7 days a week, you can. It just takes a little bit more energy to go out and do that, and it's doable. And so but eating at a restaurant, when you're really, really kind of picky about your stuff, they'll cook with sugar and canola oil, and everything's got some extra stuff in there that most people, if they're trying to follow regimented diet, have a hard time kind of taking and doing consistently. And so really thinking about that when you're deciding on what you want to do. Again, anything you make, it should be a lifestyle. You can do the Mediterranean diet, you're going to do the Whole30, you're going to do the mind body reset. There's lots of programs out there that can be incredibly valuable to kind of elimination diets. I'm a big fan of elimination diets because you eliminate everything that most people are inflamed by, because inflammation, bad inflammation against a stress response, right? You should be a little stressed out because that helps you get better. If you're just in this super chill mode all the time, chances are you aren't improving. And so a little stress is good to create growth and movement. And so with that, everything in moderation, including moderation, right? So you do the whole mind body reset, just 80 days or something. That's Kelly Brogan's system. Super cool. Abigail, who I interviewed one of the first podcasts, she does her program, so check her out. And then the Whole30, Melissa, what is her name? I don't know. Forgot, spaced it, but that Whole30 program, super valuable. I've done that a couple times, and that's a really good one. And so those are both elimination diets. And then the guidance is, if you're in this inflamed state, normally what is that, Hippocrates, name blanking on everyone, but let food be thy medicine and let thy medicine be thy food, right? There's so much truth to that. I think the simplest truths are often the best. If you can boil something down and just say it very simply, you're going to get a lot more out of it for most people. And so, my buddy said it once really well, where you see overlap is where you see the truth. And so many different programs and people are saying the same thing in different ways. And so what resonates with you is what you should take. So yeah, there it is. And again, after those elimination diets, once you're back, once you're feeling like you're in a good headspace, once you're feeling like your body's happy, then at that point you should reintroduce slowly, kind of one by one. Again, you crash on a diet, you crash off a diet, you go off alcohol, you go off refined carbohydrates, you go off of sugar, you go off all these things, and then the day after you're done with your 30 days, your Whole30, you go and eat all those things, you're kind of defeating the purpose. And so even if you did a slow, a fast or a 2-week come off of everything, then reintroduce 1 week by 1 week. But really that 30 days is kind of necessary to wash out most of that chunk, and so be aware of that. I think that program was designed really well. And then you should bring those things back in one by one so you really can make the most out of everything. So yeah, that's all I've got for you today. Really appreciate you joining us. Mental wealth moves. Again, the best investment you can ever make is yourself. So thanks for joining, and make it a great day. Thanks for joining today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mental Wealth Moves, where the best investment you can ever make is yourself. I'm your host, Casey Dubravcic, board-certified psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, owner and operator of Revitalize Ketamine Clinics, ROHCT Wellness Bar,